The original Final Destination laid the conceptual foundation of the entire franchise, introducing the central motive of cheating death and paying the price. Directed by James Wong, the film follows high school student Alice Browning, who, before boarding a flight to Paris, experienced a vivid premonition of the plane exploding midair. His panic caused him and a handful of classmates and a teacher to be removed from the aircraft, which moment later exploded exactly as he foresaw. What initially seems like a miracle soon became a curse, as the survivor began to die in a bizarre, meticulous orchestrated accident. Alex gradually realizes they are dying in the exact order they were supposed to perish on the flight, thus revealing that death has a design one cannot be interrupted without consequences. This film stands apart for its philosophical undertone. Death is not personified but instead manifests as a natural order correcting itself. The concept of fate versus free will is explored through the characters' desperate attempt to evade their destiny. Alex, clear-eyed and increasingly paranoid, becomes obsessed with the pattern and attempts to disrupt it. The presence of William Bloodworth, a mysterious mortician played by Tony Todd, introduced the mythological weight of death as a cosmic force, cold, calculated, and absolute. The movie structure is intelligent and tightly paced, using suspense and a sense of inevitable dread to elevate the otherwise simple premise. It closes with an ambiguous reminder that even temporary victories against death is just that temporary.
After the crash, this turned this tragic story into something even stranger.
David R. Ellis' Final Destination 2 opens with one of the most iconic set pieces in horror cinema history, a massive freeway pileup that claims dozens of life in graphic detail. Kimberly Carmen premonition allows her to block a highway entrance, saving herself and others from the disaster. Like its predecessor, the survivors are hunted one by one, this time with an added twist. Death is not only catching up with them, but it's doing so in reverse order. The film distinguishes itself by attempting to answer questions left open in the first installment, most notable the idea of new life as a way to cheat death's design.
Why is this even happening to me?
Unlike the psychological focus of the first film, Final Destination 2 leaned more heavily into gruesome and inventive kill sequence while maintaining an analytical tone about the fate. The survivors are connected through a web of coincidence tied to the first film, creating a sense of overarching consequences. Kimberly and Officer Brooke attempts to outmaneuver the design using logic, research, and even attempts at rebirth to disrupt the sequence. Again, William Bloodworth appears, this time offering cryptic advice that only add to the existential weight of the film. While the body count increases, so does the franchise's investment in an internal logic about death. The notion that life and death are transactional adds thematic richness, setting Final Destination 2 apart as both a worthy sequel and a thoughtful expansion of the universe. The third installment, directed once again by James Wong, revisits the structure of the original film while introducing a new visual gimmick, death foreshadow through photograph. High school senior Wendy Christensen has a vision of a catastrophic roller coaster accident moments before it occurs, allowing her and several others to escape. What follows is a more intimate, character-driven narrative emphasizing Wendy's psychological deterioration as she attempts to decipher the clue hidden in the photos taken the night of the accident. Final Destination 3 returned to a smaller cast and more claustrophobic setting, centering on the psychological unveiling of its lead. Wendy is plagued by guilt and obsession, embodying the anxiety of helpless knowledge. The film explores the idea that forewarning doesn't always equate to salvation, and that even when you understand the rule, the outcome remains unchanged. The deaths are again shockingly elaborate and ironically tailored to each character's personality or occupation, an extension of fate-twisted sense of poetic justice. The photographic motif brings a detective-like quality to the film, with Wendy and Kevin trying to piece together images that may or may not hold the key to survival. However, the film concludes on a grim note, reinforcing the franchise's fatalistic mantra that design, once disturbed, will always find a way to restore itself.
Lost your fucking mind?
By the time the Final Destination arrived, the franchise had developed a template. This fourth installment leaned into that formula with abandon, but sacrificed much of the earliest film's psychological tension and thematic complexity in favor of 3D enhanced spectacle. The protagonist, Nick O'Bannon, foresees a mass casualty event at a racetrack where fiery debris kill dozens. Once again, his warning saves several people, but death comes calling with predictable brutality. While the film introduced a few new elements, such as the idea that seeing vision can lead to active prevention of death, the execution is more superficial. The characters are broadly drawn, serving as little more than placeholder for elaborate death scenes. The deaths themselves are inventive but feel emotionally hollow, relying on shock rather than suspense. The tone of the film shifts towards camp and self awareness, undermining the sense of dread that defined earlier entries. While the visuals are amped up thanks to 3D technology, the result is a film that prioritizes form over function, ultimately feeling more like a ride than a story. Despite its commercial success, The Final Destination marked a creative low point for the series. Just when it seemed the franchise had exhausted its potential, Final Destination 5 breathed new life into the series. Stephen Quill films open with a stunning premonition of a bridge collapse, offering a return to high-stake tension paired with character-driven storytelling. Sam Lawton's vision saved several co-workers, but the cycle began anew as death began reclaiming its due.
How did you know?
What distinguishes this installment is its structure and twist ending. The film pacing allows for actual character development, and the death returned to the suspenseful Rube Goldberg style sequence that made the franchise iconic. The twist that Final Destination 5 is actually a prequel to the first film reframes the entire narrative, retroactively enriching the mythology. There's also a more thorough exploration of death rule, including the controversial kill someone else and take their life loophole. This moral complication adds ethical texture to the franchise's otherwise deterministic outlook. By the end, when the survivors board the ill-fated Flight 180, the cycle is complete. The film retroactively elevates the franchise's structure, turning what could have been a throwaway sequel into a narrative linchpin.
Death is coming for our family.
The upcoming Final Destination Bloodline represents the franchise's boldest thematic departure to date. Rather than focusing on unrelated survivor of a singular disaster, this new chapter explores a family whose ancestral act of survival disrupted Death's balance. Slated to release in 2025, the film promised to combine intergenerational drama with the franchise's signature fatalism. Director duo Zach Lipowski and Adam B. Stern aims to re-establish the suspense and practical effect that defined earlier entries. The story follows Stephanie, a young woman plagued by vision, who uncovers that her family has been living on a borrowed time thanks to an incident decade earlier involving her grandmother, Iris. With death now targeting the bloodline, the narrative shifts from isolated paranoia to a generational curse. Tony Todd returned in what is said to be the final performance as William Bloodworth, further grounding the new film in franchise lore. The shift in focus to legacy and mythological depth position Bloodline as both a reboot and a capstone. If successful, it may not only reignite the franchise for a new audience but also reframe it as a meditation on inherent guilt, cosmic balance, and the true price of survival.
Good luck.